From the Missouri School of Journalism, welcome to Global Journalist. I'm David Reed. Blogs and microblogs are the primary sources of independent news in China. But the government has gradually restricted online discussions of political and social issues. Even popular artists are being targeted. And the Great Firewall has become better and better at censoring social networks. This spring, for example, censors introduced a real name registration requirement for microbloggers. Our guest today on Global Journalist is the founder of the annual convention of bloggers in China, Isaac Mao. Isaac, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Isaac is joining us by telephone from Hong Kong. I wanted to first to get a general idea of the Bloggers Conference. It's always had a broader focus than blogging itself or even spreading news. That it's all about using the web to build communities. Is that right?
Exactly. When you remind me of the 10th anniversary, I think it's just like playing back a long movie from since 2002 to today.
Right.
It's been a long...
Isaac's talking about this. He wrote his first blog 10 years ago, almost to the day. At the time, he later called it a seed fire. What did you mean by that, Isaac?
Since 2002, we have accumulated millions of bloggers in China, but nobody realized that the first blog post I published then was really like a seed that triggered more and more people to generate this viral effect, and more people join this movement spontaneously or automatically. So after years of brewing up, some early bloggers decided to team up to have a blogger conference in China. That's the year of 2005.
And what was the first gathering like? Was it an interesting mix of people?
It's very much out of our expectations back to 2005, because we thought there could be only several dozens of people can be gathered up. However, we actually had over 200 people the first time in Shanghai, and we found a venue provided by a local partner. And then we found the people coming from every provinces of China.
Wow.
To join this conference.
And it seems to me that the Bloggers Convention illustrates the history of the virtual cat and mouse game between bloggers and censors. The Bloggers Conference had to be canceled the past 2 years, and this year it became a virtual conference, a Google Plus hangout, and therefore unstoppable. Is that correct?
Exactly. It's very much an interesting conference for Chinese blogger conference, because for the first time from the beginning, we decided the conference itself is an conference. It means that nobody actually lead the organizing this conference. All the people join the conference define their agenda by themselves. So at the first time and the second time and third time, no actually the big attention from authority. But once we published so many things about this blogger conference, including thousands of pictures we posted on the Flickr, on YouTube, and some other personal blogs, the authority started to notice us. Then they try to stop us from being organized again. That's back to 2008. And once we got the pressure from authority, we started to try to move from city to city, not sticking to one city.
You held it in a cave 1 year, right?
Yeah, we had a cave conference because a small town in Guangdong province, they hosted us because they don't get the top authority instructions. They don't know what's the Chinese blogger conference. So they hosted us in their tourism, in their new tourism site is a cave, and we had this conference getting 300 people there, but it's one of the most very sensitive conference we had because all the speakers being invited that time were very outspoken political bloggers.
Now, before we continue our discussion, I want to remind everyone that you can view or listen to this program anytime by downloading our podcasts at globaljournalist.org. You can also find interesting articles, photos, and interviews related to our program on our website. So please send us questions or comments via globaljournalist@kbia.org or our Facebook page. So let's go back to the first bloggers conference, and you talked in your keynote address about the power of many small voices, and you wrote a blog a few years ago that, quote, "The new flat network of content sharing dramatically changed the paradigm of free speech." Could you elaborate on those points?
I actually didn't realize how powerful the meme can spread over bloggers network back to 2002. But I imagine that if some people that using blog as a learning tool, that so many knowledge can be spread over millions of Chinese people to be an alternative way to their traditional educational system, because the traditional educational system is very stubborn one based on well-defined, the authority-led defined content structure and textbooks. So I just want to use blog as an alternative to change the educational system. But after only 1 year of my blogging, I realized that so many people from different areas, different sectors, they can join this movement. They can help Chinese people to be more open-minded, to use some small messages to change their behaviors. So I imagine some of those paradigm change in my first keynote speech in Chinese Blogger Conference, 2005. And many people were encouraged after the talk. They said that that's something just like I imagined, before, but I didn't realize it's just can be realized by bloggers network. So it's the right time. We need to continue this conference. That's why we decided to make the conference continue.
And when's it going to start, and how's it going to work?
We actually didn't plan each conference very early each year. However, we actually released the date and time and agenda very late, very close to the conference each time, because we don't want it to be publicly scrutinized by the authority, and the people just like flash mobs.
Right. Yeah.
They were notified 2 or 3 weeks before the conference, and they decided whether they should come or not. So each time we didn't really know if we can still continue the conference, but strangely we did make it for 5 times.
So you've had 5 Google Hangout bloggers conferences?
We had a new format this year because in the past 2 years we actually were interrupted by authority. So we decided to use Google Hangout this year, and we defined some new formats of people gathering online as well as offline. If they have interest to use CNBlog.com, this brand name, just like TED.
Yes.
People can use CNBlog.com X to define their local activities. So we have both online and offline format now.
What are some interesting anecdotes so far through these virtual hangouts? What comes to mind as far as a really good dialogue?
Yeah, we have invited some very interesting small communities of practice. Like one project is called 译者. In English, it means translator. The team never shown up before, although they have translated thousands of foreign media reports in the past 3 years into Chinese to let Chinese people to know how foreigners are talking about China society and the political changes.
Right.
But they never shown up offline. It's impossible to invite them because it's very risky to reveal their identity in the physical world. So just by using Google Hangouts, they can show off with disguised faces and voices, so they can talk to people how important it is to build the bridges between English word and Chinese word, and how people love them to help them spread those translated news reports.
Yeah,
it's the first time we see that, they really had so many fans and readers. We didn't realize it before. And many other similar projects, they respond to us that they would love to join us.
Can you give an idea of how many people we're talking about, like what the audience is?
The first time we had this gathering is about over 700 people simultaneously online, but we cannot get them all in because the limitation of bandwidth.
And can you tell how many people have viewed it, have seen or heard the content?
Finally, we invited 200 people into the virtual room, like open virtual conference hall. We cannot get 700 people together.
Yeah.
But it's very much an amazing number for us because every previous offline conference can host only 300 to 400 people.
Okay, let's. I'm going to talk in a little bit of generalities here. How has blogging changed journalism in China, and also after that, I'd like you to talk about how it might change society.
It's a very broad question, but we can try to make it short.
Okay.
Because so many journalists join bloggers network as well, since they cannot publish all their opinions and reports on their own, maybe media site or maybe the newspaper or TV station. They cannot do it because all the traditional media or mainstream media controlled by the authority. We call it the propaganda department of the party. They have issued all kinds of instructions for any single event. They will guide it how to talk about it, how to censor. This kind of instructions, made up the whole landscape of Chinese mainstream media. However, those journalists, I think they don't like this kind of things for many years. But until they found blog and microblogging today, they cannot have a channel to express. So they join the bloggers network and use their independent bloggers channels to express or maybe tell people the side stories off their mainstream media coverage.
And as far as the broader question, I know that one impact from this gathering is you got to know Rebecca McKinnon, the former CNN Beijing bureau chief who wrote about how bloggers in China viewed online censorship and has also talked about the future of the internet and freedom in China. And she says that she sees the growing online space for civic discourse provided by blogs as a recipe for gradual, slow evolution, not a democratic revolution. Do you agree?
I think so, because I think the blogging or the blog phenomenon changed China in a way that's very different from other maybe society, because China has double, settings from both tradition and the communism politics. The traditional Chinese culture is a very hierarchical system, and the communism system is the same thing, that people were controlled in the central government.
So they're almost like not really inclined to exercise free speech or express their own opinions.
It's very hard, by using traditional ways, like in other countries. People have any chance to publish their own newspapers or their independent radio stations using frequencies, etc. It's very hard, but with those blogging things, it seems like very small and subtle, expression. But it linked people together, like we were doing, using the conference format, using the small meetup, flash mobs, etc. People started to realize they can connect to each other horizontally, and not the traditional hierarchical structure can outlook. So this is a very subtle change that is not like street demonstration in other countries.
Okay. Just to put this in perspective, how big was the blogger population in China back in 2005, and how big is it now? What's the estimate?
We have only roughly 1,000 bloggers back to 2002, and in the next 3 years to 2005, it's no more than 200,000 of them. But now I cannot really tell the exact number already, because there are so many bloggers online expressed in different ways, and the blogging format changed to macro-blogging, picture blogging, video blogging, etc. So I can only roughly tell it's roughly over 60 million bloggers here in China now.
60 million, okay.
But it's very much to be estimated.
How has this the blogging and being out in the public eye, how has this affected you personally? I know that your initial blog was shut down. Could you talk about that?
My first blog was shut down also in 2005 because I talked about the censorship system with what we said, what we called it, Great Firewall system. I try to guess the mechanisms based on my personal observations. So I draw a picture that moment and post on my blog. And then the second day, I found my website cannot be accessed because it was hosted in a Shanghai-based, ISP. And I called them. They said that they got the instruction from authority, from some department they cannot reveal, and they cannot keep my website hosted. So I have to move my blog to overseas website. And then for years of talking more and more, my blog was noticed by the authority again, and they blocked my blog from being accessed within China. So it's the second time my blog was stopped being viewed by my audience.
And when was that? When was the second block from the overseas server?
2009.
Ah, okay. And have you been able? How do you, without giving away details, how do you communicate now with the Chinese
I'm still writing on my blog hosted in overseas servers. I moved several times, but it kept being monitored and stopped, and blocked by the IP tracking system, IP address tracking system. I'm using several type of blogging tools now, like microblogging in China, some other Web 2.0 tools to publishing pictures, and also we have many bridge bloggers, which means they transfer content from overseas blocked websites to internal audiences. I mean, domestic audiences. So we get our content being heard all the time.
So I think I read somewhere you wrote that the more they try to crack down on the social networks, the better they're going to become, and the more popular they're going to become. I think. So, what has been the impact of the attempts to censor the blogosphere?
It's a very interesting phenomenon in China because in Chinese political system, they have kind of a political slogan called building harmonious society. But Chinese bloggers joke that harmonious society means that they harmonize everything. It means to block everything. So when your website was blocked, the blogger will tell people in other channels like microblogging to say, oh my God, my blog website just been harmonized. So people will spread this kind of information, and people will say that, oh, you are so great because your website has been harmonized. It's a kind of endorsement by the authority that someone is really important. Some bloggers are important. So one by one, we know many other people maybe we didn't meet before, or maybe don't know their name before, but once their blog was stopped or blocked, or their identity were removed on the domestic web services, we know, oh, these people must be very interesting, we should know.
But there have been people arrested and jailed and punished in other ways because of the content they put on the web. I think one of the co-founders, Peter Huang, I forgot his last name. He was jailed and then tweeted, and then there were so many people that talked about it that they let him out. Could you recall that story?
I'm not sure which exactly the person you are talking about, but there were really so many people suffering from their freedom of speech. I'm talking about the political reform here in China. I'm somewhat, connecting most of them in virtual world, either directly or maybe via friend of friend with them. I think they were very brave, to touch base those events directly, like the Wenzhou, bullet train crash. So many people talking about it, and they try to reveal the truth, how those bureaucracies, happened during this disaster, and what's the real death toll of this accident,
Yeah.
and what's the officials, responses, in the after the event. So they reported on the site of the disaster, and some of them were taken away, some of them were harassed, at home, some of them put into jail. All the time it happens. I think it's a kind of thing that people in this policing country that they could always face, including myself.
Yeah.
But I think people are becoming braver and braver because they realize that if they don't share online, if they don't talk about their experience, they won't get more and more support from public. And I think it's becoming a consensus for those activists or the common people that they would love to talk about it online, and they get supporters, maybe sometimes thousands of supporters, sometimes even millions of supporters could happen. That's something different from some small countries that if the social network is not big enough, some voices could be silenced, immediately. But in China, even the censors doing so many things from physical torture to maybe to voice silencing, people's voice still can be spread it out.
Well, I hope that we've come to the end of this week's edition of Global Journalist. I hope that that you are able to continue traveling freely and don't get in trouble from the authorities there. And thank you so much for being with us today. Global Journalist is produced by the Reynolds Journalism Institute and the Missouri School of Journalism. Our program is directed by Travis McMillan, audio by Pat Akers. Raymond Tungakar is our executive producer. Regina Wang was our lead producer. Now stay with us for Free Press Watch and join us again next week for another Global Journalist. I'm David Reed.
And now, Free Press Watch, a segment on Global Journalist, where each week we bring you a rundown of major events affecting press freedom around the world. I'm Regina Wang. Today's news comes from the Wall Street Journal and Committee to Protect Journalists. 2 news publications in Myanmar will be allowed to print after the government suspended them for breaking the country's strict censorship laws. When the government initially issued the suspensions on July 31st, about 100 journalists took the streets to demand the suspensions be lifted. Later, a number of publications decided to black out certain parts of their front pages to show solidarity. The government announced on August 7th that the 2 news organizations, Voice Weekly and Envoy, can resume publication on August 18th. In Myanmar, all private news organizations publish weekly to accommodate to the stringent censorship laws, which require them to submit all their news content for approval before publication. For more information on these and other events affecting press freedom around the world, please visit our website at globaljournalist.org. Thank you for joining us this week. I'm Regina Wang. See you next week.